His image burns bright in the memory of millions who yearned for a vanished America. His speed could blur your eye. His swing could skip your heart. And when he smiled, girls giggled and boys caught the mischief in his eyes. Mickey Mantle, he was baseball's #1 pinup. However mutual the affair became, it took years for Mickey and the city to warm to each other.
Mantle did not at first react well to New York. Mantle was very much small-town Oklahoma. He didn't know how to play the media game at first.
I go to the cage and I go to Mantle and I said to him, Mickey, can I get you on the interview show after the game? Why don't you interview him? He pointed to a utility infielder who was working at.
He'd be sitting there at his locker and you'd be interviewing him, and when he had enough, he'd never say excuse me or anything. Just get up and walk away.
Burdened by heavy media expectations, it took Mantle several years to bust out of his country boy cocoon. But impressive numbers on his contract and in the box score didn't earn him the respect of a city enthralled by the mystique of Joe DiMaggio.
Finally, in '56, he won the Triple Crown, and people say, oh, finally, now here he is, he'll win the Triple Crown every year. Well, he didn't.
First, he was booed for not being Joe DiMaggio, which something he never claimed to be. Then he was booed as a draft dodger because his knees kept him out of the Army during the Korean conflict. And then he was just booed because they got used to booing him.
Mantle was booed a tremendous lot in Yankee Stadium until 1961. When Maris and he started going after the home run record, Mickey became the crowd's beloved.
That ball is going, it is gone. There's one. Off the top of the upper deck. He said that one. I imagine after all this is over, somebody may write a story about the month-long, day in, day out, excruciating pressure.
From May through early September, Mantle and Roger Maris traded shots like a pair of heavyweights. As their respective home run totals reached into the 50s, the national eye fixed on their pursuit of Babe Ruth's cherished record. Meanwhile, a long overdue transformation was in progress.
By that time, Mickey Mantle had been around the Yankees for 10 years, and he became sort of the Babe Ruth of his time, the icon that everybody loved.
We were all cheering for Mickey to break the record more than Roger. Mickey had the reputation of power and home runs. Roger didn't have the reputation when he was with Kansas City or Cleveland.
Mantle had more color, more flair, more box office, more marquee value than Maris.
During that home run streak, the fans and the press were, came right out and said they'd rather Mantle win it than Roger.
There's a drive. That ball is going gone. Number 51 for Roger Maris.
Battling a severe head cold on September 10th, the People's Choice hit his 53rd homer to pull within 3 of Maris. 2 days later, Mantle was in Lenox Hill Hospital being treated for an abscess caused by an injection meant to cure his cold.
I remember the night when Mantle said to Maris, I can't do it anymore, Raj. It's up to you. Go get him.
Fastball hit deep to right. It could be it. Way back there. Oh,
While Maris gained immortality, Mantle won New York. With the fans on his side, he took on a new shine, and the press started reconstructing his image. The Mick was the hottest interview in baseball.
When they would first arrive on the scene, they were new faces. They were unknowns to him. He got much more comfortable in what to expect as he came to know the various people better.
Mickey all of a sudden became a charmer. He was approachable, affable.
Then he was the wounded hero. He always said the right things about Roger, never showed any jealousy towards him or bitterness.
That established for all time Mantle's personality and his position as the hero. And all the worship of Mantle later really dates from the juxtaposition with Maris and not with the Mickey Mantle before that.
Come on out, Mickey, and get back your famous baseball.
By 1961, 47 million American households had televisions. And Mantle, with his near-perennial appearances in the Fall Classic, became prime talent for sponsors looking to cash in on his white-hot sports celebrity.
I need energy, lots of energy. Know what I do? I eat a hearty breakfast of hot pancakes and plenty of K-Rose syrup.
It was the first time that the fans had an opportunity to see what the player was really like. He became the new all-star and superstar and MVP.
When I was 3 years old and watching on a black and white TV back in Oklahoma, I looked at my dad and I said, "You can be from Oklahoma and play in the major leagues? That's what I want to be."
If the annals of baseball are filled with talented country boys, not many arrived in the majors at 19, and even fewer had a fraction of his skills.
Mantle had the greatest natural ability of any player that ever played.
Mantle digging hard, still going, great hit!
He'd run as fast, throw it as hard, and hit him further.
Mantle coming to the plate. Mantle running the bases. Here's a white boy that runs like a horse.
I don't know anybody that has gone to first base as fast as he could.
Mantle wails it into the left field bleachers for another home run.
Mantle hit those home runs over those monuments. And you remember Mantle just, pow, you said, man, that is raw power.
When I joined the Washington Ball Club, one of the first things they told me when I went into Griffith Stadium is, there's where Mickey hit that ball out of the ballpark, hit off the sign, and went out of the stadium.
Into the yards of houses across the street. It's got to be one of the longest home runs I've ever seen hit.
Arthur Patterson, who was the Yankees PR director, went chasing after the ball. He said he went across streets and lawns, finally found it, and he gave the measurement 565 feet, which nobody questioned.
And that day we sat there, and Mickey got up left-handed against Pedro Ramos, hit a ball off the facade. And I remember it just kept going and just grazed the facade as it went. It hit and then came back in field, and everybody just went.
Mick had been chasing home run number 500. As we rode to the stadium, he said that he had called Merlin back in Dallas. And it was Mother's Day. And he told her, he said, "I'm going to try to get number 500 today as a present for you." And sure enough, he hit number 500.
Here's the payout pitch. Yes, they did! There it goes! It's out of
A decade earlier, while the Cold War raged across the globe, New Yorkers from Harlem to Canarsie hotly debated the merits of three local baseball heroes, each a center fielder.
We had Mays up at the Polo Grounds, we had the Duke over at Ebbets Field, and we had Mantle at Yankee Stadium. Every three-corner it was, well, who's the best center fielder?
The Yankee fans, the Giant fans, the Dodger fans were comparing the numbers to the three of us and getting into very heated arguments.
We created an award called the Willie Mickey and the Duke Award. When Mickey Mantle got up, he said there was always this great big argument over who was the best. He said, "I want to tell you, Willie, for the record, I'm glad to be tied with Duke for second place."
Mantle was the most humble man that I've ever met in sports.
For all his humility, the Mick's off-field behavior was reminiscent of another Yankee whose nocturnal exploits were more suited to Confidential magazine.
He was a lowercase Babe Ruth. He just loved to party.
Mickey, Whitey Ford, and Billy Martin had an all-night binge and a taxi cab ride, rolling the windows down and throwing up and then drinking some more. Next day, bleary-eyed, couldn't talk, he had cotton in his mouth. He plopped down on the bench, and Casey came in, took one look, he said, "Get your ass out there, now." So that he smacked the home run and crawled home. When he reached the dugout steps, it puked all over Casey.
He was a true mythological sports figure back in those days. You know, a man who could go out, play the game hard, win the game, and then drink and carouse all night, and would be a champion in the bar as well.
I thought that was a special gift. Why shouldn't he be able to drink more and do these things? Look at all the other things that he's exceptional at.
We were not willing, because of our athletic background, I think the macho image that we thought we had, to say, "Hey, I've got a problem, I need to do something about it."
If he didn't drink and he didn't act the way he did and he didn't stay out late like he did, he may have been the greatest player that ever played the game.
There
wasn't enough hours in the day for Mickey. He played the game hard on and off the field.
Men liked Mickey because he was a man's man. He conducted himself like a guy would. When we hooked up in the evening, it was very sociable, you know. I mean, it was a fun time.
Women threw themselves off of 9-story buildings to Mickey. He had that beautiful, young, all-American face.
He enjoyed women no matter where he went. If you would go to the Mule Box where they stayed in Kansas City and you'd go up there, well, you couldn't believe how many women would be up on that floor.
As the father of 4 sons and still married to his teenage sweetheart, Mantle sacrificed his family on countless bar stools and illicit beds. It was a behavior kept from the public by a journalistic code of ethics prevalent at the time.
There seemed to be a general feeling that it was the media's duty to let these players be lionized, idolized by the young fans, and not be disillusioned by some of their habits.
But in 1970, Jim Bouton's best-selling Ball 4 delivered a play-by-play glimpse of life as a Yankee. Mantle was portrayed as a man-child, emotionally immature and self-centered. For his kiss-and-tell effort, the former Yankee pitcher was deemed a pariah.
Ball 4 represents 1/10 of the gathered material. I spent a page and a half on Mickey Mantle. If I was looking to get back at somebody, I certainly, would have spent more than a page and a half on it.
There was a feeling, that Bouton had violated the code. Do you know what the Yankee ball players did? They took Bouton's uniform, they threw it into the toilet and defecated on it.
If Ball 4 exposed Mantle's social misbehavior to the public, it was no surprise to a family frozen in the silent void of addiction.
The first thing in an alcoholic family is communication, and our family had 0. The only way we could ever communicate was when we were all drinking.
The first conversation I ever actually had was, I was probably 16, 17 years old, when I was actually able to start going out and having drinks. The alcohol actually helped us get to know one another.
Mickey was an absentee father. Mickey couldn't wait to leave home because the proverbial girl in every port was at his disposal. There was never a town that he ever hit that he didn't have some luxurious moments with female companions.
Often leading the way on Mantle's late-night excursions were playmates Billy Martin and Whitey Ford.
These were people who were eternal 16-year-olds. Whitey was often the catalyst. He was the brains behind the operation.
They reached the conclusion that there ought to be an easy way of chasing women. So they decided they would just walk in a bar and each one pick them out a girl and say, "Would you like to F-word me?"
I knew about a lot of the women, but I never would have left Mick. I loved him dearly. I adored him. I really think Mick was my addiction because no matter what he did, I always went back for more.
While the Yankees protected their less-than-perfect stars from public scrutiny, their general manager kept close tabs on them for future reference, especially Mickey Mantle.
George Weiss hired private detectives to follow the players around. When the players would leave the bar with a girl, the detective would follow the player to wherever they went, maybe the girl's apartment or maybe a motel room, and he would write all these things down and he would give them to George Weiss.
Mickey had asked for a raise, and George Weiss said to him, "Mickey, I'm not going to give you that kind of money. You don't deserve it." And Mickey said, "Okay, I'm not going to play." And Weiss said, "What the hell makes you think you're this important?" And he took some interesting photos of Mickey in stages of things that Mickey didn't want. He said, "You want me to show these to the newspaper guys?"
I know that they would have people watching them and they're drinking, but I really didn't know they had a file on him.
In the early morning hours of May 16, 1957, a half-dozen Yankees, including Mantle, Ford, Martin, and Hank Bauer, were celebrating Martin's birthday at the Copacabana, a popular New York City nightclub.
There was also a bowling team in the Copa at the same time.
This big heavy-set guy came by me and he says, "Don't test your luck too far tonight, Yankee." And he kept looking at me, and pretty soon he went back to the restroom, and Billy and Mickey followed him back there.
And somebody said the wrong thing, and somebody got belted.
Well, next morning, Dan Topping, the other owner, called us in, and the first thing he said, I warned you. He says, Hank, Whitey, Mickey, Yogi, Billy, cost you $1,000 apiece.
The incident cost Mantle much more. A month later, Martin was traded to the Kansas City Athletics.
George Weiss didn't like Billy before that, but that was the last straw. They said that Billy was a bad influence on Mickey.
With Billy, they won the pennant in '55, and they won the pennant in '56, and they won the pennant in '57. How bad an influence could Billy Martin possibly have been?
Shipping off Martin did little to change Mantle, whose self-destruction seemed preordained from those early days as a boy under the fierce eye of his father.
I don't know how much Mantle was following his own dream, or how much was he following the dream that Mutt Mantle, the semi-pro, had dumped on the shoulders of his gloriously gifted kid.
When Mickey Mantle joined the Yankees in the spring of 1951, he was country shy and baseball brilliant.
Bill Dickey the year before said, wait till you see this kid we got down at Joplin.
When Mickey came to New York, I don't know what kind of pants he had on, but they were rolled up at the bottom. And he had white sweat socks on, and he wore hush puppies. And he had a tie on, and it was about that wide, and it had a big peacock on it.
First time he ever went to Yankee Stadium, he got lost taking a subway, wound up at the Polo Grounds. Had to walk over the bridge to get to the stadium.
He was so shy and frightened that we had to almost force him to take infield practice with us because of the pregame crowd. He said that there were more people in two sections of the Yankee Stadium than there were in the whole Joplin ballpark.
Mickey Mantle. Well, here's Mantle, who's a switch hitter, as you know.
He said, I come to the Yankees, and my locker is right next to Joe DiMaggio's, and I'm having a hell of a time just getting used to being next to Joe DiMaggio. And all of a sudden, I got 20 guys standing around me, asking me questions like I'm the President of the United States.
The Yankees did a very cruel thing. They put number 6 on his back. Now, Ruth was gone, Gehrig was gone, they'd retired numbers 3 and 4. DiMaggio was wearing number 5, and you knew that was going to be retired as soon as he stopped playing. And now here's this kid, hasn't played a major league game yet, and they put a number 6 on his back, advertising the world, okay, this is the next DiMaggio.
Pitch. He swung on this. And Mickey again took that big cut, which supposedly was war from the fans.
He had such high goals set for himself, and when he didn't measure up to those goals, then I think, you know, it made his self-esteem think he isn't doing what he needs to do.
They fed upon his own self-hatred, his own self-fury, and they booed him when he struck out.
He was losing his confidence, so they sent him back to Kansas City.
But the minors offered Mantle no answers. Unable to regain his batting stroke, Mickey's confidence was running on vapors.
He called his dad and he said, Dad, come get me. He says, I can't play Major League Baseball.
So Mutt said, well, you just get your clothes together and we'll go home. He said, if that's all the man you are.
And Mickey started crying. And he said, Dad, give me one more chance.
Mantle was caught in an emotional squeeze play between too much too soon in New York and the towering expectations of his father, a gifted semi-pro player in Oklahoma who groomed him to be a major leaguer almost from birth in 1931.
He named him Mickey after Mickey Cochran. He gave him a name. He was born to play ball. He was programmed at the age of 2 to play baseball.
Mick told me once he knew what he wanted to be when he was 5 years old. He said he never got anything for Christmas but a new ball glove.
Mutt pushed Mickey hard, and he'd make him bat right-handed, he'd make him bat left-handed.
At 14, Mantle was kicked in the shin during football practice. A medical examination of the wound led to a diagnosis of osteomyelitis, an infection of the bone. The prognosis was scary.
His mother and father drove him to the hospital. The doctor there took one look at it and told the mother and father that it may have to come off. And the mother almost pulled his hair out. And the father was quaking because he saw that's the end of Mickey's career.
He was one sick boy. He was really sick. I'm amazed he didn't die at that time.
Penicillin came into being in World War II. Now, Mickey, of course, having been given the penicillin, the infection was essentially controlled.
Having survived childhood illness and the later disapproval of his father in that Kansas City hotel room, Mantle returned to New York wearing number 7 for the final 2 months of the 1951 season. But in Game 2 of the World Series, his young career suffered another bad twist.
And the ball drilled out toward right field.
Willie Mays hit a fly ball between DiMaggio and Mantle, and DiMaggio at the last minute said, "I got it," and Mickey caught a spike against the drain.
When he stuck his foot in, spikes got caught in the drain, and that knee pump, you could hear it like a cannon shot. It was awful.
Mantle said DiMaggio could have called it early, but he wanted to make sure he could look good catching it, and he called it late. And that's why I had to break so hard, and that's why I tore apart my knee.
Joe resented Mickey Mantle. He just wondered whether if there was anyone else in the outfield with him, whether he would have been called off.
Joe should have called him off at that particular time, because if I was playing center field, I would have caught the ball coming in.
And then a very traumatic thing happened to Mantle. His father was dying of cancer, and they were put in the same room. And after the series, they got out. And of course, Mantle could barely walk, so as he was stepping into the taxi, he leaned on his father, and his father collapsed under Mickey's arm. So how traumatic must that be? You're in pain, and you lean on your father, and your father isn't there.
By spring, Mutt was gone at just 39. He joined his father and 2 brothers, all of whom succumbed to various forms of cancer before Mickey was out of his teens.
If you have a close relationship with your father for all of your life, and suddenly he's taken away from you, that has to have a profound effect on anyone.
Because all the men in the Mantle family have died young, he thought he would too. That's how he lived his life, just thinking, I'm going to die young, just like my dad and my uncles.
I think this year I'd rather lead the league in runs batted in, home runs, and hitting. And that's my goal for this year.
Mantle was good to his word. He captured the Triple Crown in 1956, and for the first time drew comparisons with the greatest Yankees. But if he failed to reach that exalted level of Ruth, Gehrig, and DiMaggio, his teammates testify to a special brand of greatness. Mantle was the ultimate player's player.
When you get a guy like Mickey, you put him up here, he can do no wrong. You just think that he's immortal. He was just like this with his teammates. They were all on the same level.
In the 5 years that I was in the Yankee clubhouse, I never saw another teammate of Mickey Mantle that didn't seem to thoroughly enjoy being associated with him, being on the same team with him, and really kind of hold him on a pedestal in awe.
Mantle was tremendously popular with the other players. He was much better liked by Yankee teammates than DiMaggio was.
He was a team player, always wanted to win, never played for himself. He hated to lose.
62 was a year when I had my biggest honor. I was voted runner-up to Mickey Mantle for most valuable player. And then he made the statement Bobby should have won it. And to me, that was better than winning it.
Mantle's classy words came in the wake of back-to-back World Series titles and a 3rd MVP award. Mick was reaping his just rewards.
You're now up to Ruth, which means $80,000 or more. I guess this is the most gratifying day of your baseball life.
Yes, it's a great day for me. It's a big thrill to make that much money. I just hope I earn it.
There's a fly ball out to right field. That ball is going, it is gone.
He was a superstar who was so fragile and so vulnerable. He was movie star handsome.
He looked perfect, very handsome, blonde, blue-eyed, muscular, with a kind of gee-whiz personality. So everybody identified with Mickey Mantle.
He had a very cool name, Mickey Mantle. He looked like a baseball hero should look, like a guy out of a Chip Hilton novel or something.
I have to have orange juice with its vitamin C and energy to play my best ball.
If you said Mickey, you didn't think about Mickey Mouse or Mickey Cochran. It was Mickey Mantle, and it didn't have to be New York.
In the 1964 World Series against St. Louis, Mantle hit 3 home runs, though the Yankees lost their second straight fall classic. Meanwhile, beneath his pinstripes, pain was radiating through Mantle's battered physique. Yet he continued to play without complaint.
I remember they put a pad on his leg and he was taking batting practice and the blood was coming out of the pad and into the uniform.
He beat out a hit to first base. And there was blood dripping from home plate right to first base.
There's a quirk in American hero worship in that if you have sort of a tragic weakness or if you've been humbled a couple times, people love you even more. People loved Mickey Mantle because he had those sore knees.
Mantle was also tormented by an increasing dependence on alcohol.
He didn't have sip a drink, he gulped a drink, you know. So he'd usually drink twice as much as anyone else if he was out. Alcohol just totally pickled his brain.
Probably 70% of us were into the area of alcohol abuse, but that went unnoticed.
It was very hard for me to think of Mick as an alcoholic for many years because no matter how much he drank the night before, he could always get up and do his job the next day.
He never missed a ball game, but he would show up drunk. He would take Listerine out in the field with him just to make sure that nobody would accuse him of being drunk.
We had to wake him up to come to a game. Mickey struck out 4 times, and he dropped a fly ball in center field. And we got beat 1-0. We come in the clubhouse. I remember Frank Rossetti says, "That's our hero."
You'd be out and he was drunk. He would never let you have the keys to drive home. We'd been out to eat with Carmen and Yogi Berra, and as we got in the car to drive away, Yogi said to me, "Merlin, I wouldn't ride with him if I were you." Well, I get in the car and we're going and he's speeding. Bam, we hit a telephone pole. And I went through the windshield. We could have been killed.
In the spring of 1969, it was clear that alcohol, late nights, and chronic injuries had claimed his talent.
I don't hit the ball when I need to. I can't steal second when I need to. I can't go from first to third or score from second on base hits. And I just think it's time that I quit trying.
After 18 seasons, Mantle finished with 536 home runs and helped the Yankees win 7 World Series. Ever since, writers have speculated on what might have been.
He realized that he had led part of his youth under a false premise, which was the belief that he would die young. There was a movie at the time called Knock on Any Door, and the famous line was, "Live fast, die young, and have a good-looking corpse." And I think Mantle tried to get absolutely as much out of life as he possibly could get before the inevitable happened. And then the inevitable didn't happen.
The great number 7, Mickey Mantle.
On June 8, 1969, 1 month before Neil Armstrong embarked on his moonshot, Mickey Mantle was given his own historic send-off at Yankee Stadium.
To this day, I don't think I've ever experienced those same chills that I did, on Mickey Mantle Day.
He always felt that such a day like that, he would come up inadequate because he thought everybody would be inadequate with whatever they said after Lou Gehrig made his remarks on his day.
I've often wondered how a man who knew he was going to die could stand here and say that he was the luckiest man in the world. But now I think I know how Lou Gehrig felt.
That was a big day for the family, but also a very sad day because after Mick retired, we both got ulcers from worrying about what are we going to do now.
He'll take one last turn around Yankee Stadium.
The celebration at Yankee Stadium was wonderful, but the aftermath of the retirement was a nightmare.
When he was through and the crowds weren't there and the aura of being the greatest player that ever lived wasn't there and it started to dissipate, he went into business, he lost money.
After Mantle became a flack for an Atlantic City casino in 1983, for which he was banned from baseball for 2 years, he met Greer Johnson, a young, attractive Georgian who took his career in hand.
Being the public relations person for the casino was really not what Mickey Mantle was about. In the mid-'80s is when the baseball card shows, the memorabilia industry really started to grow. It was very easy for me to improve Mickey's appearances, his value, because he was so loved.
Greer Johnson saw money when she saw Mickey the first time. He was so head over heels with sex and her. She had him in the palm of her hand. She made deals that he wasn't even aware of until it was over. That didn't mean that she was stealing anything. She was just doing what she thought was right for him.
We had a great relationship. We had fun. It was 10 of the best years of my life. And it really doesn't matter to me what other people might think. I know in my heart what we had, and I know the love that we had, and that's all that's important to me.
Although Mantle's extramarital affairs were a matter of public record, Merlin did not seek a divorce, not even when Johnson became Mickey's manager and companion in the mid-'80s.
She said, "I'll divorce you." I said, "Fine, go get a divorce. And I'll cut you off from every penny. You'll have nothing. You'll have no house. You'll have just the clothes on your back." And she remained.
I knew that it was hurting her, but all of us had starved for Dad's attention for so long that we didn't want to say nothing to her because we thought that might jeopardize our relationship with him.
I was asked one time, how did I feel being the other woman in Mickey's life? And my true feeling is I wasn't the other woman. I was the woman in Mickey's life.
If I wanted to get rid of this anger, that I was going to have to pray for him. And I can tell you, at that time, the only prayer I could think of is that maybe he'd get hit with the Mack truck, because I was so angry that I really used to think about killing him.
There were times she wanted to kill herself because she felt so ashamed that she could live under these conditions, never knowing from moment to moment what he was going to do or say to make her life miserable. In spite of everything, she was committed to him.
Finally, in 1994, Mantle acknowledged he was killing himself with alcohol and began a personal quest for forgiveness.
He came to realize that he had the same problem that I did. He'd asked me what it was like at the Betty Ford Center. Did I have any fun at the Betty Ford Center? I said, "Mick, you're not going to have fun. You're going to get well if you ever go."
What really kind of worried us the most, though, is, right after he got out of Betty Ford, our little brother Billy had passed away. And when Billy passed away that Saturday, we were really worried that that might send Dad over the edge again, but he hung in there.
He said, "I want you to promise me something." And I said, "What?" He said, "When I get out of here, if I ever take another drink and you see me take another drink, I want you to promise you'll kill me." And I said, "Mick, you're asking too much. There's only one person that can do that, and he's a whole lot bigger than I am."
It took a real man like Mickey Mantle to say, "Hey, what I did was not good. I can't tell you why I did it, but I did it. Nobody made me. I did it on my own. I'll pay the price."
During a nationally televised interview with Bob Costas, the Mick expressed regret for a life lived on the edge.
One thing that I really do feel, I was not a good father, really. I mean, I wasn't ever there.
I liked him better once his faults became known. I liked the fact that Mickey had very visible weaknesses. I find a flawed human being much more appealing than someone who is or pretends to be perfect.
Shelley said, "Our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought." The nature of the human story is, our greatest stories are tragedies, not comedies.
When we return, a repentant Mickey Mantle bids us goodbye through the specter of death.
Walls in the house that Ruth built. Now, Sunday, we celebrate the life and career of Mickey Mantle, only on ESPN Classic. It's been 5 years since the Mick died, but his legacy remains. The greatest Triple Crown winner in baseball history. The most World Series RBIs.
Mantle has just broken a World Series record.
And the most powerful switch hitter ever. Classic Mantle.
I would like to say to the kids out there to take a good, you talk about a role model. This is a role model. Don't be like me, you know? I mean, God gave me a body, ability to play baseball, and that's what I wanted to do. Give me everything. And I just...
I guess he was trying to say, you know, he made a mistake and he should have been there, and I think he was wanting to say that, you know, I'm kind of sorry and I wish I could have been there more for you. Or maybe he was just trying to make a statement for maybe other fathers too, that you need to be there for your kids.
Mantle, who lived in controversy, seemed destined to die the same way. He was given a liver transplant in June 1995, just days after being diagnosed with cancer and placed on a waiting list.
The one who's the sickest and with the highest acute risk of dying is the one who gets the first shot.
Nobody pulled any strings. They can't put people in front of other people. It was that he was the sickest person in Texas at that time.
I do not think Mickey Mantle himself ever felt that there was preferential treatment. If he had felt, he would have been the first one to say, I don't want it.
Despite his new liver, Mantle lasted just 2 months, not nearly enough time to exchange proper goodbyes.
I wrote him a letter and I put everything in it that I was feeling, thanking him for being so nice to me through the years and just lots of things like that. I never got to read the letter to him.
I was not allowed to go to the hospital. And that's probably the thing that has made it hardest. Because I never knew he was passing away.
At one time when I happened to be at the hospital in his room, the phone rang and someone was calling in her behalf. And when the conversation ended, after he had told them, no, tell her I do not want to see her. I do not want her to come here.
In the waning weeks, Mantle informed his doctors he no longer wanted updates on his prognosis. Old teammates were beginning to arrive in Dallas. The Mick had only days to live.
Hank and I grabbed his hand and we said, we love you. He said, I love you guys too. He suffered. Mickey suffered a lot. He was already heavy in the legs and his stomach, and he was already yellow. We didn't expect him to go that fast.
They all worked very hard to have a smile on their face. Whitey brought him a baseball signed by all of the members of the present New York Yankee Club. And Mickey reached over and got it, and he said, you know, it's the first time anybody ever brought me something autographed by other people.
My dad had a dream that he died and, you know, was gone up to heaven. And they told him, Mick, you know, we can't let you in because of the things you've done on Earth. But before you go, would you mind signing these 24 balls for God?
He called me one day, and after he knew he was going to die, he said, have you ever been baptized? Well, what's it like? They use water on you, don't they? I said, I think there's some water involved. And he said, well, you know I can't swim. You tell him I can't swim. And in the closing days of his life, he was baptized.
Mickey Mantle, one of baseball's all-time greats, suffering cancer of the liver.
Mickey Mantle died Sunday at the age of 63.
Mick will be buried in Dallas tomorrow.
We continue to grieve over the death of Mickey Mantle.
As we all remember, Mickey Mantle.
Someone like Mickey passes on. You know, it was kind of like a pinstripe had fallen off the Yankees.
Mickey Mantle was family. He was as important as uncles and cousins and nephews. He was part of our lives in a very, very meaningful way.
There's no one who had the romance that this guy had, you know, with the public.
He was the American dream. To this day, they still love him.
When he couldn't play ball anymore, a whole generation felt older. When he got cancer, a whole generation felt the fear of death.
I just hope God has a place for him where he can run again, where he can play practical jokes on his teammates and smile that boyish smile. Because God knows no one's perfect.
It's dangerous to make cardboard figures out of people. You're always going to be wrong. He was neither entirely this nor entirely that. But there's always the possibility for redemption. There's always the possibility that the better angels of your nature will take over in the end.
Just before he died, Mickey Mantle gave us a reason to love him. He was willing to use himself as almost an anti-role model in a very heroic way.
There's a picture, and he was kind of like hanging his head down, and you can see him like throwing his batting helmet away. And for some reason, I just sat there, and I don't know how the words came to me, but it just said, can I touch your face? Can I hold your hand? Can I give you a hug again and again? Can I say I love you? You're also my friend, my father. And just seeing that picture, I felt like I wish I could have been there for him for that moment, you know, just kind of say that's life, and you're going to strike out.
The more people wrote questioning perhaps how he lived his life, the more the general public embraced him and wanted to say, hey, he's still my hero.
Mickey Mantle represented the 50s so evocatively. Both he and the times were a lot different than they seemed. And perhaps with his death, the euphoric barroom glow of that era has finally dimmed. The two things most truthful about Mickey Mantle were the way he played and the way he died.